So I was listening to a podcast with Rob Bell this week, and he was talking a lot about grief, and it just brought up a lot for me in thinking about the times that we're in and about grief, and so prepared a few thoughts of my own, though to be fair, riffing off of some of what was in that podcast, which I can highly recommend to you. But here's this week's message. I used to be a hospice chaplain. It was both sad and sacred work. There's something indescribably holy about being with people in the midst of grief and loss. I can't help but see the parallels to the current times we're living in. There's grief over time lost. Grief over school years with no finality and incoming school years with much uncertainty. Grief over missed reunions, weddings, funerals, birthday parties, graduations, and all the other occasions calling us together. There's grief over injustice for those who are hit hardest by disease and broken systems. There's grief over lost trust as misinformation plagues us from all sides. There is grief for the before times, a time we cannot return to, and a grief over the struggle to establish a new normal, even as a virus surges, or we question if it does, or we throw our hands up and don't know what to believe. As I often saw in the families of loved ones near the end of life, there are wide gaps between people on how to proceed. Some want to prolong life as long as possible by any means necessary. They just can't stand the thought of letting their loved one go without doing everything possible. And others want to let them go now, gently. Do nothing more. Cause no more pain. Just get mom, dad, grandma as comfortable as possible and say their goodbyes. Neither of these is inherently wrong, but the argument that ensues between them is often destructive to relationships. And I believe that the heart of the emotional exchange is unexpressed, unfaced grief. And this bottled up grief and not having one right answer and so many unknowns, it makes for intense and often heated exchanges. Sound familiar? Can you too now see the parallels between hospice and corona times? So what do we do with all this grief? Based in my experience of being with families in this space, the first thing is to acknowledge it. Acknowledge your own grief. Acknowledge that others are grieving. It may look different. Some get angry, some weepy, some depressed, some highly productive, some deny, some highly anxious. The reality is there's no one way people grieve. And if I face my own grief, I can be more compassionate and gracious to the way another grieves. For my own grief, I find it helpful to picture my grief as a small girl. She lives somewhere in the center of my being. She's hard to look at. It breaks my heart to see how sad she is. She is huddled and wears an expression of despairing, so hopeless, so void of any joy at all that I can hardly bear to acknowledge her. I often have to look away. Somewhere along the way, I got the message that sad is bad, that I should wash my face, shove it down, keep moving, get over it, don't be weak. But now I think that the strong thing is to look in the face of my grief, of that sad little girl inside. I picture taking her up in my arms. I picture holding her and telling her it's okay to be sad. I'm not going to ignore you. I squeeze her tight and assure her that we can get through this because we've gotten through so much else. I stroke her hair gently and tell her I love her. Her big heart feels so much. I thank her for reminding me to slow down, rest, to affirm how hard this all is. I kiss her cheek and tell her I know it's going to be okay somehow, someday. It's going to be okay. I'm not trying to talk her out of her feelings or cheer her up. That's not her job, and it wouldn't work anyway. Instead, by paying attention and being compassionate and gentle with her, with me, I don't get all bottled up, all stopped up, and then bursting out at myself and loved ones or faceless internet people that say something triggering to my grief, whether they're denying it or insisting upon it. It's scary to feel our feelings. It's vulnerable. It's contrary to the image of strength and productivity and capability we've been taught is the ideal. And when we do feel our feelings, when we really face our own grief, healing is possible. Compassion is possible. There is hope where there was none, grace where judgment lived. Healing, compassion, hope, grace. This is what I believe God, universe, spirit wants for their children, for the offspring of source. I know it's what I want for mine. A love so great, it can withstand and even bring comfort in all the grief and fear we have and come out more healed and more holy on the other side. May it be so. Amen.